That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Hello, and welcome to the podcast at the intersection of faith and fear, where every week we discuss what scares us in order to find what saves us. This is the fear of God. Speaking to you right now is one of your hosts, Nathan Rouse, and typically with me is fellow co-host Reed Lackey. And guys, he was here a minute ago, and he just said, "I'll be back." And then he left. Come on. You had to see that one coming. In the meantime, while we await Weed's imminent return, while we await Reed's return, allow me to welcome you back into our series on learning how to lose. What's funny is I try to have this conversation about learning how to lose with a big smile on my face, so it makes it sound like I'm not taking this seriously, but I'm deeply taking this seriously. Titled In the Morning. This is a series meant to help us meditate on loss as we navigate life inside of a pandemic, giving even deeper resonance to our regular mantra. Stop changing your title. You're throwing me off. In the meantime, allow me to welcome you back into our series on learning how to lose, titled In the Morning. This is a series meant to help us meditate on loss as we navigate life inside of a pandemic, giving even deeper resonance to our regular mantra of assessing what scares us in order to find what saves us. To know more about this particular series, go back and listen to our Infinity War conversation from a few months ago. Yes, Infinity War, the Avengers film. But I'm getting ahead of myself because here at the Fear of God, we explore, we don't explain. And we're going to have a very special guest here momentarily who's going to explain a lot to us. But right now, I want to explain that you can listen to the Fear of God at your nearest podcast platform. You can, some episodes at least, watch the Fear of God on YouTube. And you can browse the Fear of God on the web at thefearofgodpodcast.com, where you'll find episode archives and merchandise. Cell phone cases, t-shirts, campaign buttons, face masks. Read?
Hello. I told you I'd be back to the podcast, and here I am. You thought you were expecting little puny Reed, but you're not. You're not getting him. You're getting me. I'm just so excited.
Oh.
Wait, I have a trick for you. I have a trick. Wait, it's a trick. It was never Arnold. It was me the whole time. It was always.
I have this really bad Arnold Schwarzenegger impressions, but I'll return.
You will. You'll be back.
It'll be big.
Listeners won't know, especially if you edit this as nimbly as I know you can. If you don't, I don't care either. But I was trying to get through the mildly serious, kind of content of In the Morning. Meanwhile,
learning how to lose.
Reed's name keeps changing to famous Arnold characters. It's like Conan the Lackinator, Reed the Barbarian. Like, oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
Please stop.
Reed the Barbarian.
Reed.
Yes.
Welcome. You, like Batman, like Ernest, you will find any way to sneak Arnold into the Fear of God canon.
I love him so much. He's great. I love him. I only amuse myself, but I love it.
Before we get to it, it's business time. We got some announcements to get to.
It's business time.
It's business. Oh, I'm not even gonna bother. It's all right. We'll get there. Maybe later. We got a new book club coming up, Riri. It's book club. Do it again. Well, oh my gosh. Arnold just ate the book. Took a bite out of the book. It's like Cookie Monster over there. So we got book club coming up. I'm struggling with my words. Help me. I need to get Foyle's Philavery out and find some new words. So a month ago, time is a face on the water. I don't know what day it is. We covered our first installment of book club with Lovecraft Country, which, by the way, we're not doing a what you're watching this episode, but Lovecraft Country is a pretty baller show, Riri.
It's a fantastic show.
It's excellent.
It's great.
So we covered the book Lovecraft Country with author Matt Ruff. Unfortunately, we will not be interviewing Ray Bradbury coming up. But for our
No,
second
I wish.
installment of book club, we are covering in October the novel Something Wicked This Way Comes. As we get a little closer, perhaps even starting next week, we'll lay out a little bit of what that breakdown will look like, since we'll be doing it in sections.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Not to be confused with Inceptions.
Um,
What else you got, Riri?
in addition to that, man, we failed to highlight it last week. But no, it's okay. But we've mentioned it a couple of times. We have just passed our 4th anniversary, which is really crazy.
Whoa!
It's crazy.
Oh my
We've
gosh!
been doing this for 4 years. So, but in August was our 4th anniversary, and we are coming up on our 200th episode, which is a very, very exciting landmark. We're excited. We hope you're excited. Our 200th formal episode is just like 6-ish weeks away. So we would love to have, as part of that, we would love to sample in some audio from your reactions, responses, thoughts, feelings about the fear of God in general. Why do you listen to us? Why do you still listen? What got you into it? Has it made any version of impact on you? What is a favorite episode? So what you can do is you just send us a brief voice memo recorder. Try to keep it no more than maybe under a minute, 30 to 45 seconds. Yeah, just send us your brief thoughts. We would love to have those, and we will incorporate them. That's a big key. We are asking you directly to send us these sound bites. Send them to fearofgodpodcast@gmail.com. We'd like to receive them in these next few weeks so that we can incorporate them into our 200th episode. If you would be so kind, we would greatly appreciate it.
Which is like 6 episodes away.
Yeah, exactly. It's like right on the cusp. So, so please.
I feel like we are, dancing down the song line for the flood that's coming.
Yes.
And trying to either incite it or stave it off. I just don't know. Speaking of things you can send to us, we also, our ongoing want is your rendition of what you're watching, reading, listening to. We featured last week one of our favorite Canadians, Brent Westerink, longtime listener to the show, who sang a lovely little ditty version of what you're watching, reading, listening to. We featured a number of these at this point. We will continue to feature those. We'd love to hear from you. We've got a few left in the bank that we haven't gotten to yet, but we'd love to have you join the chorus. What else you got, Reed?
All right. So some of you, especially even those who have been around for a long time, or even if you're a relatively new listener, you may not know that we have a really cool Facebook group where some vibrant conversation takes place every single week. It's often afoot regarding things that we are not covering here. Very recently, one of our longtime listeners, Dave Courtney, delivered just a beautiful sequence of thoughts on faith and fear that was exclusive to the Facebook group. So by all means, if you have a Facebook account, then please come over and join us at the Fear of God Facebook discussion group. We would love for you to take part of it, because obviously this is not the end of the conversation. So we would love to have you part of that. Come join the fun. It's really cool.
Clever, Reed.
Thank you. Well, that was business time.
That was business time. You know what time it is right now?
What time is it?
Time for a little bit of jackanapery.
Oh my God. What is this?
Today we're going back, not so much to Jordan, but into the leftovers, where we're going to cover episodes 3 and 4 of season 3. That would be episode 3, Crazy White Fella Thinking, featuring the one and only Kevin Sr., and episode 4, G'day Melbourne, my favorite morning show in Melbourne. And we're going to be looking a little bit at what's been going on down under with Kevin Sr. and with Nora and Kevin Jr. on a little jaunt to the outback. So that is going to be TV guideposts right now, straight into your ears. Riri.
I feel like
what do you feel like?
The music that we normally have under that, we're just
it's got to have You got your didgeridoo underlaying the the TV guidepost music.
Oh my gosh.
Read.
Oh Lord.
Crazy white fella thinking. That's
okay.
You.
Wow.
How do you feel about these couple of episodes?
So I do have some thoughts. I will lead with a very strong statement, and I know it's going to be galvanizing, but I think
it's just the two of us here.
I know, but I think Crazy White Fella Thinking is my least favorite episode of The Leftovers. I think of the show, not of the season.
Right.
I think it's my least favorite episode of the show. I love Scott Glenn. I love him. He's a great performer. He's interesting to watch. There are some really great moments in this episode, but all things considered, I think it's the least favorite for me because of how much work it is. Like, it's a lot of work, and it is such.
It's push
a
a little girl down a wheel, but you can't watch it.
Why are you talking like this? It's gonna be just Australian versus Arnold.
Oh my God! It's the Australian versus the Austrian. They just shut off this episode. They're like, this. I know what I'm getting for the rest of the episode.
No, thank you. But no, it's just. I mean, it's not that what's happening in the episode is not interesting, but just when I think about, there were only 8 episodes in the season, and in the breadth, it does establish some important things for where things are going, but like an entire episode dedicated to this particular journey just feels a bit laborious. It doesn't even feel like trivial. It feels like they were really going for something, but it just is so much work for me, if I'm just being honest.
Wow, hey.
Yeah.
You can't be honest with me and all the people. Who can you be honest with?
Who can you be honest?
To me, it's hard to use qualifiers like good, bad. Just in general, I try to be more open than that, Reed. But no. So
I'll be open.
Oh God. Oh Lord, help us. I would agree with you that it's a very out of the box episode. It requires a lot of buy-in. Now, watching it this time through, I actually was struck because maybe there was a moment halfway through it where I was like, why am I being asked to watch this? Which sounds really...
Wait a minute, who did this? I don't understand what you're just looking around like
whose idea was this?
We made a terrible mistake.
Because here's the thing, like I think of, is it Across the Sea, the end of Lost?
Yes.
So yeah. It takes more work for me to enjoy Across the Sea, the Lost episode, than it does for me to enjoy Crazy White Fella Thinking.
Interesting. Okay.
Though I do think they're similar in terms of energy and what they ask.
Yes.
But
yeah.
What I was trying to say about why am I being asked to watch this wasn't why did we choose to do this together. It was more just, okay, this is so out of the box. What should I take away? And the two primary notes for me were, one, however out of the box, however maybe challenging, it's really a beautiful episode. Like, it is, from a pure cinematography standpoint, it's gorgeous. It is like a mini movie.
Yeah.
And I think that may have been part of where they were leaning, was let's just really go for it. Because the value of an episode like this to what we have come to find around how he did Watchmen, a thinker like Lindelof, a creative like Lindelof, is he's trying to not just touch and go when he's talking about another cultural insight.
Right.
So I found once, because I'm with you, like it's a lot. It's I don't even know runtime wise, but it feels like a long episode. There's a couple of very extended monologues in it that are very interesting, but are less entertaining than they are interesting. And for an hour plus episode, you kind of a character that isn't one of your primaries, entertaining would be helpful. But I just think I kept leaning on, it's like I said last week. This episode is, in a nutshell, one of those aspects of the show is really reaching high now.
Yeah.
Will they occasionally miss? Miss to me implies sort of creative failure on the reach. I don't actually see it that way. I think it's just for what they're after. I mean, the law enforcement officer, no, it's when Sharon reads his charges,
Yes.
and says appropriation of sacred ceremonies without permission, theft of creation songs. I mean, those two just nuggets of information are so explosive to, I think, what this season, at least on its periphery, is after, which is religion, appropriation within that religion, like colonization, like all these massive ideas that they try to distill into an hour with Scott Glenn, which is really hard.
Sure.
Because I did find that pretty fascinating. I mean, they are not shying away from, as the title suggests, a crazy white person going to a foreign country, utterly, as they describe it, stealing the essence of their faith and appropriating it for himself. Like, that's a really interesting conversation that, I'm with you, gets a little mired in just a little bit of pedantic viewing. Sure.
And it's
that was a lot. I'm sorry.
No, I would agree with all of it. And like, he genuinely is positioning himself as kind of this motif of a white savior, and all of that. It's got all of those things on its mind. You mentioned that it's cinematic qualities, that, like, I remember seeing this film, and I thought about this film because, unfortunately, it being the only film of this kind that I've seen, it's what I always think of whenever something takes place in the Australian outback. There's a film from 1971, directed by Nicholas Roeg. I honestly would not remember much about the details of it, but it's called Walkabout. And I did.
It's also the title of the John Locke episode from.
That's true.
Third or fourth episode.
That is true. But I did, in my little trivial bit digging, found out that like the actor who plays Christopher Sunday, David Gulpilil, is he was a performer in that 71 film, and it would not surprise me in the slightest that if there was an intentional sort of design to recreate the feel or the pattern of that film. But again, I've seen so few films that take place in the Australian outback. It's probably Walkabout and Crocodile Dundee. So it's not. Did
you ever see The Proposition?
Oh, I always forget that that's in the Australian. Oh my gosh, it's a wonderful film. That's a powerful.
I'm happy to have reminded you of that.
Oh, that's a wonderful film. I should rewatch that soon. Yeah. But there are, like, I'm ragging on the film. I'm ragging on the episode. There are some really powerful and pretty hard to forget moments in it. I mean, obviously the man immolating himself.
Jeez.
That's
what a scene okay. I'm glad you brought that one up because, and I do think it's immolating, but
immolating.
I should look in foil to know what immolating means.
Foils, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just Arnold trying to burp up some words. Golly. A thing I mentioned last week, how the Nora, and then at the end of episode 2, how if you've seen it before and you know the stuff, it's a little less invigorating as much as just, oh yeah, I remember how this plays out.
Right.
That said, the immolation scene is so arresting because it is literally, without context, it's insane.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
With context, it's insane. I mean, really, like, you at least know the context. But that scene is crazy.
Yeah, it
Um,
really is.
I will say this, and we we can hang out more in this episode if we want to or not, but I will give props. I do think, as little entertainment as this episode yields, it is a very interesting episode, and the things they go after, a lot of them they achieve. They shoehorn this character Grace out of nowhere and give her one of the most emotionally wrenching monologues of any character in anything ever. Oh my gosh.
My note right here says it's a scene that if anything makes the effort of this episode worth getting to, it's that scene. It's
unbelievable.
I mean, it's powerful. It's really powerful.
And if you're not watching the show, one, come on. But two, Scott Glenn, Kevin Sr. runs into this elder Australian woman, Grace, and she is who we see drown the Australian sheriff, Kevin, of the previous episode. And
yes,
he delivers this just dreadful monologue about how, and she was a person of deep Christian faith, and she was away from the house. They had 5 kids. She and her husband had 5 kids, at least 1, maybe 2 of which were adopted. She was away from the house when the departure happened. And she comes home and finds all their Bibles in the little chapel they'd built on their property, and takes great comfort in thinking they have been taken in the biblical rapture.
Yeah.
And this is at about the middle of her monologue, it makes this turn, and she starts getting very emotional, because then the authorities, however long later, reach out to her saying they found bones on her property. And the ultimate end of the story is that what actually happened is the dad got taken in the departure. The kids, without a parent, think mom got taken too, sit around and wait, and then leave. So all the kids got left, and then wander into the wilds of the outback and die. And she ends her monologue with this wrenching line, "I never even considered searching for them." And says, more or less, of her faith, it was just a story. It was all just a stupid, silly story.
Well, because she also ties it directly to and it is it's a lengthy scene, but basically, like, then what coalesces is she sees Kevin Sr. and she finds this sheet of paper in his hand, and the sheet of paper in his hand is a fragment from the book of Kevin that Matt Jameson is writing and has sent him presumably a copy of. And so then he's got this page in his hand, and that the text of that page is what Grace has used to fundamentally drown the sheriff, believing he's going to come right back from the dead.
Right.
And so it is this powerful examination of all of the ways in which, like, and you said it last week, like the show is aiming for the exercise, practice, inception, embracing of religious thought, all the ways that we cope with belief and unfulfilled expectations and devotion to that belief. And it is a really, really affecting. It's a really affecting story that honestly I think is too big for even one conversation to fully. I have a feeling we're going to be referencing that narrative for many, many episodes to come, because it's it's very, very
well. In the "that ain't right" camp is that darn snake bite. Goodness gracious!
Oh my gosh! Ugh. Oh, it's terrible. I was just like, oh my Lord, I hate snakes.
Yeah. All right, Indy. You feel like moving into Good Day Melbourne?
Yeah. Let's leave it. So in contrast to my feelings on Crazy White Fella Thinking, like, one of the things that I wrote down about Good Day Melbourne is Good Day Melbourne, is that this is a really, really well scripted and plotted episode. Narrative wise, it's not my favorite episode of the season. Certainly not of the show, but like it's probably the best singular narrative of any episode because there's a lot going on.
Spoil it for me. Which is your favorite episode of the season? Have we gotten to it yet?
We have not gotten to it, but I'll tell you. Although the name of it eludes me, my favorite episode of the season is the Lori episode that is coming up. That's my favorite episode of the season. But yeah. So G'day Melbourne is following Nora and Kevin as they traverse through Australia for their own particular reasons, and it bounces back and forth. Kevin is essentially there just to accompany Nora. Nora is there to pursue the lead on that she received from Mark Lynn Baker about the possibility of another departure, them harnessing this radiation and putting her in a device that's going to send her forth. And so you're simultaneously following Kevin, who is just presumably starts there just hang out with Nora and just get away from Jordan. And then you're also following Nora, who is actively pursuing this lead that she's got. And I think just, again, plotting wise, scripting, narratively, it's one of the tightest episodes because it's really propulsive, although it is emotionally devastating, particularly towards the end. But no, this is a really affecting and very powerful episode.
Yeah, I think all of the Nora stuff in this one is pretty strong. If I'm perfectly honest, the Kevin story is one of, if I had to critique season 3, Kevin's presence in Australia in this episode feels like, okay, we need to give Kevin something to do.
I understand that.
It feels a little less purposeful. It feels more if this were an ongoing show, it's just another episode of the adventures of a brain broken Kevin, because kind of by definition it's a regression for him. It's not a push forward, which you could argue it is for Nora as well. But Nora is moving towards something where Kevin is just sort of in stasis. Yeah. So I'm going to throw this line out, this back and forth dialogue, and then prop up a conversation starter here. What if they ask why I came with you? Kevin is on the plane. Nora. Oh, I'll tell them you've come to send me off because we're in a toxic codependent relationship and we both realized we're better off apart than we are together.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Good Lord, Nora. I referenced this last week and I want to hear your thoughts on this because this is your now third time watching this season through. As you constantly reminded us. Watching this episode again for the second time, I was a little struck for all of the emotional energy and investment and love I have for this series and for the characters of Nora Durst and Kevin Garvey. It felt like a fast move from fraying on the edges to where this episode ends. Would you echo that?
I would completely echo that. So in many ways, the third season as a whole, and I said this, I think, in an earlier episode while we were making our way through it, the third season as a whole feels to me very much like an epilogue. It feels like a hey, let me show you in brief succession all the things that happened to our characters after the events of season 2.
Right.
And I feel like it doesn't always take you on that journey with them as much as just sort of show you that's where they got. And I do agree, like they're and I get that it's an illusion, but their affection for one another in the first episode to get here when neither of them have really like done anything to transgress against the other it's a big ask.
Well, and this is where I wonder about just the mechanics of, you asked this last week, why the 8 versus the 10, who knows, but I think even just one more episode of them that charts us, that helps us a little further along in the fracturing of their relationship helps. Because what's hard is that's a hell of a scene.
It is
It's
powerful.
amazingly crafted. It's amazingly performed. It's devastating from a character standpoint. I'm just left thinking, wow, that was fast.
Yeah, right. I understand.
And it reminds me, this is a random aside here, it reminds me of the last season of Game of Thrones, where if you tell someone the events of the last season of Game of Thrones, you're like, well, that's kind of cool. But then so much is just squished into the runtime that it's like, oh my gosh, you guys are just literally blazing through story. I don't feel that level of that with Leftovers, but specifically the relationship of Nora and Kevin feels like it goes from 100 to 0 super fast.
Yeah, agreed. And really the only place that I could point to and identify as like a kind of a big offensive rift with them is the episode 2 episodes ago when Kevin emotionally says he wants to have a baby with Nora, and then she laughs at him, which she does apologize for, and the apology feels sincere. But that moment, you can really tell something is kind of like breaking down between the pair of them.
Yeah.
But I say that, and it is actually Kevin in this episode who sort of shatters it all. Like it's his commentary that really just breaks it all. Like you don't get more volcanic of a line than saying like, then you should go be with them.
Right.
You know,
referencing
like,
your kids who have
referencing your kids.
evaporated to a potentially other dimension. Yes.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. So,
well, it's funny you say it that way, because one thing that has been subconsciously pinging me for episodes 1 and 2 is how Kevin, other than like the Evie, I know about what Kevin's interior life sort of materializes by the end of the season. So I kind of know where it's going there, or I recall where it's going. But in terms of real world Kevin, he feels about as put together as he's been in a long time. And so to your point, this does feel a lot like Nora's season to lose. You know, and so it is it's sober Kevin shattering her illusion of herself.
Yeah.
That kind of leaves it. And I mean, again, it's great. You got Take On Me making multiple appearances in this episode. You've got Take On Me leaving us out of the episode with one of the most gorgeously framed and shot images in anything.
Yes.
With the water dripping from her head, from her eyelash, her eyelid. But emotionally, it's like, hey guys, guess what? These guys are terrible for each other. It's like, whoa.
No kidding.
We got
no
there
kidding.
Quick. The only other real note, I've got other notes, but the only other real one I want to point out is we hold my baby reminds me of Claire from Lost. She's always talking about the baby. My baby. My Charlie. I want some peanut butter, Charlie. Give me some. Hold my baby, the little turnip head. When
she
the
had
woman.
More.
No, she didn't.
Yes.
That really was the sum of her existence.
My baby. My baby.
You sound like an old lady version of her.
Oh, that's how she still is. Like on in the years, she's just my baby.
It's been another episode of TV Guideposts. Specifically reading these specifically visiting the Down Under with some wallabies and some kangaroos and a few little joeys here and there. And it's been a good time watching some G'day Melbourne, catching up with the crew. However, it's been a very difficult run for Kevin Sr. Got snake bit, got laid out under a crucifix, got found by a crazy woman. And, then it was a really rough go for Kevin Jr. and Nora as their relationship falls apart in the blink of an eye. But tune in next week when things will happen that I'm not quite privy to because I haven't watched ahead yet. But we'll see you next time on TV Guideposts.
Wow.
Oh, I wanted, while I was doing my monologue there, to signal to you to keep going, but I didn't want to break. I didn't want to break character because that was really
and that's the only reason I stopped, is because I was like, he will never get through this if I do.
That's glorious.
Oh man! So
Bring us in, Riri.
Man, so here we have. I've looked for the excuse to bring. We brought him on with Predator, and brought him on with The Running Man. I always love spending time with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I wonder.
It's really great.
Steve Beckley, I know you're listening. I want some sort of chart. Gosh, I wish I were a graphic designer. I want a chart of repeat appearances in Fog Cannon. Patrick Wilson is probably leading a bit.
Yeah,
with Conjuring, both now. Conjurings and Insidious. Is there something beyond those two? Hard Candy.
Hard Candy, yeah.
There's 4 right there. Arnold's at 3. I don't know if there's any others.
Conjuring's Insidious and Bone Tomahawk.
Patrick's at 5.
Yeah, so Patrick's at 5. But Arnold's at 3, and it's going to be hard pressed. I mean, we're not going to do the Kindergarten Cop episode. Like that's not going to happen.
What about Twins? No, Junior. That is a horror movie.
It is.
I don't want that.
We could do Junior. There could be a case for Total Recall, but it'd be a slim one. But
would it slimmer than Terminator?
It's no slimmer than Running Man. Slimmer than Terminator, but no slimmer than Running Man.
Or Running Man had that exploding head. That's enough. That's enough to get anything consideration on the fear of God. Oh, someone's head explodes? Okay, cool.
Okay, no problem. I don't know. Conan the Barbarian, the first one.
Conan the Barbarian. I've never seen Conan the Barbarian.
Conan the Barbarian.
Is it good?
The first, yeah. I mean, I like it. What's really interesting is like Conan the Barbarian is like hard R, and Conan the Destroyer is PG.
Whoa.
Yeah, and it's like it's the tonal difference between the two. Like Conan the Barbarian is like grimy, very graphic. It's got everything that you could possibly imagine in terms of like violence and nudity and sort of.
Well, he is the Sumerian, isn't he?
Yes, yeah. I mean, he's like it is very. I'm not using this word tongue in cheek. It is very barbaric in some of its sensibilities. Conan the Destroyer feels very much. Conan the Destroyer feels very much like it was trying to be a bit more accessible, kind of
family-friendly
fantasy. Conan. I don't know about family-friendly, but like good. I know, but I mean to speak honestly to it, like I feel like it was trying very hard to be more in the fantasy camp. Not that Conan the Barbarian is not a fantasy, but it was trying very hard to be like, well, let's raise it up a little bit. There's wizards and there's a little bit more like fantastical elements to it in terms of the plot and the mechanics of it all.
David Bowie?
He's
I'm kidding. I'm making a Labyrinth reference.
Oh, there you go. But no, Arnold will make another appearance. We'll find justification to bring Arnold back. But no,
he did tell us he would be.
So I can remember very distinctly. It was off pod. Actually, it might have been briefly on pod, but blink and you miss it if it was on pod. I can remember very specifically we had a conversation about like Terminator. I think it was on pod because I think it was when Terminator made one of the top horror films of the year, like in the 80s. I think it was in the top favorites of people's horror films of the 80s. I don't remember.
Or was it in Monster Mash?
It might have been in Monster Mash as well.
Regardless, what are you trying to tell me?
But I remember there was an actual brief discussion about like, well, Terminator's not really a horror film. Like, and what's really interesting is I want to know your thoughts on this. We'll get into some trivial bits and get into like my very specific question, because I know you've seen it before and the Terminator lore is everywhere. Like, I don't even know if you went into it with this thought, but assess the Terminator as a horror film. Like, do you think that's a stretch? Is it and not justifying its presence on the pod, just in general, like, could you kind of see sort of the horror sensibilities, some of the horror tropes? Or was that just completely foreign element?
I'm not enough of a cinephile to have the language to distinguish pure sci-fi versus horror or horror sci-fi blend or whatever. But, could you make the case that Sarah Connor in this film, at least, is a final girl? Could you?
Sure.
I mean, there's definitively some body horror taking place roughly in the middle with his skin
Surgical
suit
scene.
falling apart.
Mm-hmm.
That's disgusting.
That's pretty gross.
I think the Android version by the end is meant to have a almost Michael Myers-esque kind of quality to it. You like how I just did that?
Mm-hmm. I did.
I'm getting pretty good at this.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I think
then.
At first it was probably me who, when you were like Terminator's horror, and I'm like, you don't.
That's almost exactly how it went. Did you listen to the episode?
I just love the thought that in your head, this is how you remember most of our interactions. Is like, Reed offers kind of, hey Nathan, so what about such and such? And I'm just like, no, you dummy, and like that's our relationship. It really isn't. We've got 4 years. Right. We've got 4 years of recorded conversations testifying otherwise. That said, it is worth mentioning. I had a moment watching it where I was like, have I seen this?
Why do I have to watch this?
Who's asking me to watch this?
Who's asking me to watch this?
Literally, because there were moments where there were scenes happening. I was like, I don't remember this at all.
So here's what I thought, and
tell me.
I don't know this to be true, but I think this happens a lot with people. I could be wrong about this, but I think a lot of times...
Don't do it. Don't make me think I've seen something I haven't seen, because that's
no,
pop culture.
No, because, but that's my feeling is when people think of Terminator, I think most of their mind goes to Terminator 2. And I think because Terminator 2 was so culturally saturated, I feel like Terminator 2 overshadows the Terminator. Not that, like, in other words, I don't doubt you've seen it, but I even myself, this is probably, but even myself, this is probably my second or third time. It's definitely at least third seeing the original Terminator. There was so much of it that I was like, oh yeah, I didn't remember this. But I have such a strong memory for Terminator 2. Yeah. And so that just makes it feel like that's more the cultural,
real directly. I was like, Sarah Connor ain't no server. Get out of here with that stupidity. Like, what? I'm picturing, yes, to your point here, I'm picturing Sarah Connor's post-apocalyptic vision of holding the playground,
right?
Fence and incineration happening. But yeah, I was really struck because I was like, I think I saw this, but scenes would happen. I'm like, don't remember that one. Don't remember that one.
Nope.
Oh, there's Arnold. I remember him.
Oh, this guy. I know this guy. And what's funny? No, you.
No, you. You.
And I was just gonna say, what's so funny is in Terminator 2, because he's the good guy, it's like a bit challenging to really sort of recalibrate your brain to be like, oh, he's the antagonist, because he's just Arnold in this, like he delivers a really good performance for what he's being asked to do, but he's just very, it is hard to dissociate that, like, oh no, this is, because there's a moment in Terminator 2 that I feel is lost on people if they did not actively, like, consciously watch Terminator before seeing Terminator 2. And that's when Sarah is in the institution and she's running towards the elevator, and suddenly Arnold comes off of the elevator. And when Arnold comes off of the elevator, she has an extreme terrified reaction, begins rapidly trying to run the other way, and the scene doesn't have its resolution until Arnold finally leans forward and says the line that Kyle Reese says to her in this, where he says, "Come with me if you want to live."
Yeah.
And that moment, the gravity of that moment.
when Kyle says it in the first one, I was like, that's not. Nah.
I didn't come with me if you want to live.
You don't got it.
You ain't got this. But so yeah, I feel like a lot is kind of lost just because, I mean, I saw Terminator 2 before I saw Terminator.
I'm willing to say there's a chance I had not seen the Terminator.
I'm willing to entertain the possibility.
But see, what's funny is I knew I knew the major beats. Like I knew
Mhm.
the future John Connor is the progeny of these two.
Right.
You know?
Right.
I mean, so much of the imagery is iconic of him in the police station with the sunglasses.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes.
You know, him driving the car through the police station.
Yes.
Some of the final showdown. So yeah, I do think I have, but I also think because 50% of the damn movie, Reed, I was like, I don't recognize that. They cut to the future with the mechs and stuff. I was like, oh, this must be the director's cut.
Deleted scene? Did Reed sneak a deleted scene in this on this? It's a director's cut.
Wait a minute. I seen The Descent. I know what's going on here.
He's all the time full. I know you were scared when I mentioned the multiple cuts on Anna and the Apocalypse last week.
Yeah.
So let's get to a couple of trivial bits and we'll get into more of the meat of the film. So unless that felt jarring to you,
it did, but you know, whatever.
No, Reed, just
you love to let the conversation go where it will, and then you're like, no, I'm good.
I was back out. So, okay. So I had a couple things I thought was interesting. So, obviously Stan Winston, who's come up on the show before, but he does the makeup effects for this. It was actually Rob Bottin or Bottin. I don't remember how to say his name. He was originally offered the makeup effects job, but he couldn't because he was finishing up work on The Thing for John Carpenter. So another effects legend, Dick Smith, was asked, but he turned it down because he thought he wasn't right for the material and suggested Stan, and that would become a collaborative partnership and a friendship between Stan Winston and James Cameron that, you know, that maintained until Stan Winston's death in 2008. I wrote this down because I thought it was cool. Arnold has only played a villain 3 times in his career. So one of them was in this film, in the first Terminator. One of them is a post-politics film that I'm actually not going to name.
Post-politics film?
Post Arnold's politics when he was the governor and got out of politics. There's a film that he made post that season that I'm actually not going to say which one it is because him being the villain is actually a pretty major spoiler for the film. So I'm not going to mention which one that one is.
You love to do that.
I do. Hey, listeners can do the digging if you want to find out which one it is. But do you know the other one that I'm referring to where he's the villain?
Jingle All the Way.
No, although he's pretty.
Oh, well, hang on. Oh, Batman and Robin.
Yeah, all those Mr. Freeze ice puns. So this is a long known, widely told story, but Arnold was originally pushed on James Cameron as to play Kyle Reese. That was who they wanted him to play.
Wow.
James Cameron actually only met with Arnold reluctantly and planned. This is wild. He planned to go in and pick a fight with him so that he could go back and say he was too difficult to work with and they could not do him, not cast him in the role. So what?
Personality type wise, that feels like your buddy who wants people to poop their pants. It's like, why is that your starting point, James?
It's such a go-to.
Like, come on.
Right. Come on.
Jack and Rose, the guy who made Jack and Rose. Yeah. You don't pick a fight with Arnold.
No. But what's funny is that so when they had lunch, he and Arnold hit it off like right away. And to Cameron's surprise and I guess delight, Arnold actually came into the lunch meeting wanting to pitch that he should play the Terminator. And when he started in on that, Cameron saw it like right away and thought this would be great if he would play the Terminator instead. But Arnold's agents were telling him like, no, don't do this. That's a bad idea because they didn't want him to play a villain. And so then, of course, he and Cameron kind of teamed up to make that happen. And it, arguably defined his career because like it didn't launch it. Conan the Barbarian definitely launched like his acting stardom, but Terminator, like, would then, it is arguably his most iconic role. Is the Terminator. And so anyway, I thought that was pretty cool. So that's, I have a couple more trivial bits, but I don't want to saturate the
share. Like
Kyle
Kyle Reese, I will take a nap for a minute in the car and daydream of the future.
So I will mention that like when before Arnold was cast as the Terminator, the candidates for the Terminator were like virtually a who's who of stars from the late 70s and early 80s. Everybody
Eddie
from
Murphy.
Tom Selleck. Yes, sure. Everybody from Tom Selleck to Harrison Ford to John Travolta. Like, can you imagine Harrison Ford as the Terminator? It would have been.
I can imagine that more than I can John Travolta.
Yeah, John Travolta.
Well, it's funny to even ponder that. What?
Considering Michael Keaton as well. Michael Keaton was in the running.
It's funny to ponder that with what you just said of Cameron was considering Arnold for Reese, and it's like that's going to be a real short movie if it's like you send Michael Keaton, the Terminator, against Arnold Schwarzenegger, the human. It's like that toaster's toast. You know, he's done.
Yeah, it's true.
What else you got?
Have you ever seen? This is my final one. Have you ever seen? Well, either the TV show or the 70s film Westworld. Have you seen or heard of them?
Neither. Well, of course I've heard of them. No, I haven't seen them.
You haven't seen
Golly, Reed.
So I love the film from the 70s, Westworld. It was
Really?
written and directed by it was written and directed by Michael Crichton of Jurassic Park fame.
Now, what did he write the book and there's a movie adaptation, or it's a movie first?
He wrote the screenplay and directed the screenplay for
Interesting.
it. And so
girl.
Clever girl.
You get it?
But I do. I caught that reference. But what's interesting is, you know, obviously those fans of the HBO show, the more recent HBO show, would know this already. But Westworld, you know, the film from the 70s, is about robotic cyborgs who malfunction and begin to attack the tourists. So this film owes a lot, just idea-wise and structure-wise, to Westworld. Although it could be argued by me from time to time, that the entire trope within the horror genre of the unstoppable killer owes itself to Westworld, because that's the earliest instance that I can remember cinematically of a killer who just literally cannot be stopped. You just mow him down time after time, and he's going to keep coming after you, which is certainly present.
I thought I was
Terminator film
showing some horror acumen referencing the Michael Myers earlier, and you're like, no, Nathan. However, preceding Michael Myers is the cyborgs from Westworld.
The degree of accents that we've exhibited in this episode is just
it has been a long day, brother, and I'm glad I'm here with you. Are you done?
So I'm done.
Okay.
I'll be back.
Oh, God. Help me. The future of this movie takes place in 2029.
I know. That's so close.
It's so close. It actually,
so close.
I don't know. I believe
depending on how things go.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah. We're all going to fall into a black hole of mechanized law enforcement.
Oh, Lord.
Man, that is one buff naked dude.
You talking about Arnold?
What? Well. Did you think there was someone behind you right now while we're recording? Look out, Reed. Look out. Look out.
Oh my gosh. Yes. So So Arnold.
And then my next note is that is one not quite as buff naked dude.
He's fit. He's got
I didn't say he wasn't fit. He's not.
He's got some cut.
He's not Arnold
buff, though.
No.
Arnold is an imposing presence.
Michael's beans. Did you notice?
Wow. And Arnold Schwarzenegger's.
You see old Bill Paxton?
I did, yeah. And what's interesting is I remembered the trivial bit from another place where it said that Bill Paxton is the only actor to have been killed by an alien, a predator, and a Terminator, but I didn't. In this, I don't think it's very clear that he's killed in this. His buddy is killed. Like Arnold, like rips his
that's rough
heart out. Yeah, but I don't think it's as clear that Bill Paxton.
I love that you're kind of splitting hairs on that. Like
I know. Yeah,
just
whatever.
go with it, Reed. It's the trivia
fine.
Game makers. We're like,
I
think he's dead.
Yes.
Paxton.
I think he's dead. He's dead. He's the one. Yeah.
I love the very blatant Nike product placement in the department store when Bean is getting the shoes and the clothes. Like, dang. I mean,
the Velcro.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like this extra second of hold on the shot. It's like, zoop.
You have to expect
Okay.
him to like
Gotta
poke his
get
hand
those.
out. Yeah,
Yeah.
you have to expect him like poke his hand out through like da-da. Like
Yeah,
now I'm good. When you got to run away because your clothes got
Nike.
lost in a temporal
do it.
displacement.
Riri.
Nay.
This is a movie about killer robots from the future, but the real antagonist
Oh no.
is little Timmy and his friggin' ice cream in the restaurant. Get that out
That
of
was
here.
so mean.
Get that out of here.
That was so mean.
Get out of
Like,
here. I'd slap that
first
kid.
of all, who wastes ice cream like that? I'm gonna play a prank and
I
put
love
this
that
like.
that is your takeaway.
Well,
A little
That's
snot-nosed
ice cream.
kid. It's like Problem Child, the other movie from the 80s.
the other one.
You know, that other movie from the 80s. When
What's that
I
other
waited
one?
tables
Problem
back in the day, this movie reminded me of this. When I waited tables 10 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't that long ago. Yeah, because I quit right when our second kid was born and she's about to turn 10.
Oh,
One of my last days there was like a Mother's Day or something. And
mhm.
Mother's Days in the restaurant business are particularly chaotic.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember walking past this section that wasn't mine. You know, like, I don't know if you know this, but like in servers, you get your area, right?
Oh, of course.
And
yeah.
this is a it's like mid-scale steakhouse. Nice place, decent food. I'm sorry, nice food, decent place. That's what I meant to say.
Hmm.
I was walking past this table, and this older gentleman threw up his hand as I walked past and yelled, "Waiter!" Yeah, that face you just made,
Yeah.
it took a whole lot not to be like, "Customer!"
Customer.
Patrons are terrible in those settings.
Yeah.
And that little
Mhm.
Timmy. Yeah, give me a little PTSD there with little Timmy and his ice cream.
Sorry about that. Yeah,
That's okay.
Sorry. Yeah.
I'm just going down my list here. I love how
Sure.
both Bean and Arnold just use the white pages to find their people. I'm like, that.
Yeah.
Can't do that anymore.
Nope.
Not without a little bit of work.
No, exactly. No internet in general. And it's like the Terminator systematically executes them by their order in the phone book.
Yeah.
Like,
she just lucked out.
well, because
and her last name's Connor too. Is this the third one down?
But no, but that's the thing is like if you notice, so like it's Sarah Connor, and then it's Sarah Ann Connor, and then it's Sarah J. Connor. Well,
yeah.
The middle name of the very first one is Sarah Louise Connor. So if she had just, it's just those little decisions.
Yeah.
If she had just decided to include her middle initial in the thing, she would have been
dead.
She would have been fine. She would have been fine. She wouldn't have been dead. But no, instead she's like, no. I'm just Sarah Connor, and that's gonna get you killed. That kind of attitude is just gonna get
I
you
wish
wiped out one
the
day.
movie Terminator was just 1,000 Sarah Connors. Just like it's literally just rinse, repeat. Sarah Connor. 5 minutes later, Sarah Connor. It's like dead gum. It might as well have been that for how much of it I remembered.
The robot just runs out of fuel. Like, oh my god! Sarah Connor?
Is this her yet?
Oh my god!
Anybody? Sarah
So-
Connor. I love Reed.
Mhm.
Love.
Do you?
This is like classic, just classic
boy.
80s screenwriting. I love how Michael Biehn jump starts a car. And that means he's like, it's not his car. It's somebody else's car.
Right, he's stealing.
You broke into this car. You jump start it. And what does he do next?
I don't remember.
My man takes a nap. Really?
Yeah.
You're going to boost a car and then take a nap before you drive off from the location in which you took it, that you jump started. Come on. Like, no concern if the person whose car he's actually trying to boost is going to come back.
Nope.
I mean, that'd have been a real short movie.
It comes back and
Hey,
they're
sir,
like,
sir,
my car.
what are you doing in my car? That's
right.
rough.
Yes.
I just love, I like a good nap, but
Not that good.
at least complete your task. What happened?
Drive away for crying out loud. Like just
take a
get
nap
out of the
before
vicinity.
you jump
Right.
start the car. Like,
Right,
don't break
right,
into
right,
a car if if you're under threat of immediate narcolepsy, you know, like, so,
Not to mention the fact, like, it's not even the car that he's like, while he's snoozing, like, she could be done.
yeah. Oh,
like,
yeah.
you know, like, he is
Are you
like,
Sarah Connor? You know, it's like
he's
10
like,
more,
oh,
10 more
man.
Sarah Connors died
I knew I shouldn't have hit that snooze button
for that one nap.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, look,
yeah.
it's like the most run down New York City. It's really funny. You know, people talk about how in, I think, the 90s, New York City had this massive overhaul in terms of cleanliness and all this sort of stuff.
Yes.
So
90s. Yeah. Yeah.
I have to believe the pre-90s-ish New York City was a bit more, you know, rough around the edges.
Sure.
But watching this movie, I was like, there's just nothing here. Like, why would anybody ever choose to live here? Like, there's, you know, they're just running through the streets, run through the alleyways. If you're going to nap in a car, just nap before you get in the car. You're going to be fine.
Sure. Yes. Yes. Everything's blue.
It is.
Like, everything is so.
The lightning.
Well, yes.
Bill Paxton's mohawk. It really was.
Yes. So I have some. You want me to mention?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So, okay. So I do love, even from like the opening 4 minutes, I love the lo-fi 80s vibe to this. Like Terminator 2, which I keep referencing, is like it's slicker and it's a lot more high.
What year did this
end.
one come out? 84?
This came out in 84. And Terminator 2, I believe,
90?
92, I would say. Like, I think so. It's a significant difference, almost 10 years later. Well, and you can look at the distinct difference.
I can do a little bit of math.
Well, but also the span between like Avatar and the inevitable Avatar sequels and everything. Avatar. But you can look at how long
building up to episode 200 is literally just us working to put every fogism into the show.
Every single one. Avatar. But no, I love it. Like the synth score, I love this, that whole vibe. And it's easy to forget because of how culturally saturated the Terminator mythos is. But another thing I loved about this is I just loved how long it held back its main conceits. Like you talked about, you knew going in the fundamental premise, but the film doesn't reveal that until halfway through. Like you don't really, if you're watching this for the first time and have been living under a rock and don't know anything about the Terminator franchise, you would not know until halfway through that, like, oh, these people from this other place are from the future, and that this guy's come back to kill her because of her son being the war hero of the future. And I just love that. Because I consider Terminator 2 to be admittedly a superior film to this one. I think it's a masterclass in action thriller filmmaking. It's nearly perfect, but there's such a simplicity to this story and a directness that I found really appealing this time. I'm just like, this is exciting for just how direct and straightforward it is, because future installments of the Terminator franchise just almost get buried under the weight of their own self-explanations for why these characters are all still around and still messing with each other. So anyway, why are you messing?
Yeah, if I'm perfectly honest, I don't think I've seen past the second one. Granted, I thought I'd seen the first one, and maybe I have. I don't know. But
they're
that ice
not
cream,
all worth it.
Yeah, well, sure, yeah. Well, see, it's funny you say that, because I actually think there's a slightly more interesting movie without Kyle's flashbacks. Like, I like the idea, but I'm gonna couch here.
Okay.
That
sit down.
Well, that's not exactly what I meant by couch here, so I may have just misstated what I was trying to articulate. But it's late. I think the third act is really strong. I think overall I found it more just okay than I was hoping for. But part of that I do think is the weight of pop culture bearing down rather heavily on it. But that said, I don't know, and we can discuss this when we get to themes, I don't know that it rises high above to much at all above its component parts, which is not a robot.
Sure. No, I get it.
Where I'm going with this is simply to say it would have been pretty interesting for us to think a good bit longer, if we ever do at all, that Kyle might be crazy.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's a really good
but
point.
when you, and I almost wonder, I didn't do this research, it would make sense to me if it was like a studio thing. Hey, we, throw in some flashbacks for him so we know he's telling the truth or whatever. Because to me, those don't add much.
Sure. No,
ultimately.
I get it. Yeah.
Whereas a much more interesting approach would be make me wonder, like make me really wonder for a while about the validity of this guy.
I mean, you could even go so far, and this would really be getting into it because some of these scenes are great, but you could even go so far as to say, like, excise the Arnold is a robot types of indicators beforehand until it gets to the end where he gets run over by the truck and still stands up.
Yeah.
And then you see like in a world where you are like, you excise all of the futuristic flashbacks, then you only have Blue Lightning and naked men have appeared. Think about that.
What? Speaking of dreams,
Blue Lightning, and then just naked men appeared. I didn't know what to do. I was like,
hold on, I'll be back.
I'll be back. I will.
Come if you want to live.
Oh my gosh. So, but no, like, again, I'm tracking with you. Like, how much more interesting or impactful would the film have been if you hold back all of that stuff until the reveal, and like play around with it a little bit more? Is like, is this guy crazy or not? We know that he is at least interested genuinely in protecting her, but is he crazy or is he not? And then not reveal until you finally see, after he's been run over, that very affecting makeup where like most of his face is gone and there's, robotic skeleton underneath. And that be the big reveal that like, oh, he is not crazy. This thing is after her. Yes. That would be pretty interesting. I could see a world
and
where
somehow, and again, it's a, 40-year-old movie almost at this point. What would have been really cool is if somehow you keep me wondering is which one of them is the quote unquote bad guy. Like that would have been a real interesting maneuver to try to pull off until what you're describing of that reveal. Like, oh God,
Yes. And the second one, again, it's like if the second one is the first one you see, it's a little difficult to really grasp this. The second one plays around with that because remembering that people who saw the second one for the first time did not know going into it that Arnold is the good guy in that one. So they see him and they see him doing very much the same things that he was doing in this film. And then you see Robert Patrick show up, and Robert Patrick is a very sort of comparable body type to Michael Biehn. And so then in the moment where you see Edward Furlong, young John Connor, trapped between the two of them, and the scene itself is building up where both of them are pursuing him, much like the techno noir scene in this one. But it's not until both of them sort of are at opposite ends of the hall and Arnold says, "Get down," that audiences of that time realized, oh, Arnold is the protector this time. That was like a really big, oh my God. It was like a really big pivot at the time. And so anyway, I thought that was pretty cool. But no, I'm tracking. Speaking of which, like I mentioned that techno noir scene, and this would be
which one are you talking about?
The scene in the nightclub. Or the restaurant, which techno noir is like a really on the nose name. But so that moment where it's pretty great, where like the tension is building up as Arnold is pursuing closer to her, and then Kyle Reese steps in at the last minute and kind of like deflects him. So I really like that scene a lot. My last little note in the likes dislikes thing is obviously it's been cliched to bits, but the actual "I'll be back" moment is pretty cool. Like it's like that actual, like that whole "I'll be back" casually strolling out and then barreling in with his truck or his car or whatever. It's pretty cool.
Versus "Come with me if you want to live," which is about as limply delivered as anything could be. It's like,
wow.
Wow. That's how you know it wasn't intended to be the signature line. It was just like, no, just say it quickly, Michael.
Come on,
Go,
get
get
it
it
out of the
out
way.
of the way if you
Get it
want
out
to
of
live.
That's
Like,
funny.
no, I want to really deliver it with energy and passion. No, just throw it away.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, I felt like Arnold pulled a bit of a Kevin Garvey in the Terminator when he's at Sarah's house he's at her house.
Uh-huh.
So brain addled right now.
He's all right.
Yeah.
Where is he?
So Arnold is at Sarah's house, and you had Matt, the lamp wielding doofus,
right.
fail. So she calls, is leaving a message on that like
Machine.
giant answering machine that's like the size of today's laptop,
Right.
He hears it. She leaves on that message, I'm gonna call the cops now.
Mm-hmm.
Next scene, she's calling the cops and Arnold's walking in the nightclub. I was like, whoa, my man just teleported. Something fierce. That's my Kevin Garvey reference.
Sure, exactly.
Your note about him at his house and then at the lake. Yeah.
Supernatural time management.
Yeah,
Being able to just get there.
Naked man, blue lightning.
Exactly. So when all the blue lightning happened and then the naked man just appeared. Do you have any scares for this? I have a couple, but
hang on. My man Kyle Reese is literally throwing dynamite in a backpack. He is actually and actively doing that. How are you missing this?
Why are you not pointing this out?
Fog cannon.
That's true.
At the same time, he is terrible with them. He sucks at timing his dynamite sticks.
Under.
I'm actually impressed they kept that many cuts in there. I was like, really? Why are you throwing another one? You're not going to hit it. Yeah.
And the only time that he actually hits it is when he's like right up on it and just like shoves it in. Like that's the only moment. So the other piece of that I think was really funny about throwing the grenades in the backpack is he cautions her easy when she's putting the cap on, and then he grabs them and just like chucks them in. He's just wee.
Hey, catch. The only scare I have is the eyeball scene.
That's on mine, despite the clearly animatronic Arnold head.
It's a puppet.
It's
not a puppet.
But I do have like that scene is really creepy and effective when he's like doing surgery. It's pretty creepy when he's doing surgery on his arm too. I mean the eyeball thing, but then like the mechanics under the arm and everything. But I wrote down that I love, it's not really a scare, but I do love the impact of the imagery. I referenced it earlier when after he is pummeled under the truck, and then you see that the shreds against his face. Those look really, really good, really cool. But I jolted when the machine woke up after the bottom half like blew away.
Yeah.
Like, then she's sitting there mourning over Kyle Reese, and suddenly that robot's like, "Arr!" Like,
oh my God.
Just leans up and like jumps into frame. That's it's messed up.
Oh my God.
So I'll yield if you don't, but I have something that I think might be kind of interesting for theme. Do you have anything that you really want to make sure gets pointed out?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead?
It's not super. There's not a lot to it. It's more a thought that I will expound upon a little bit and see if you want to take and run with. So I will confess that the watching of this movie, what I thought and still maybe think is a second viewing, was just kind of okay. The third act did invigorate me a little bit once they're in the little factory element.
Sure.
But I had this Anton Ego moment, Reed, when and not because it made me reflect on me, but what I was trying to conjure there was this notion of you're just moving along in life, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, I'm thinking really deeply about a thing that I don't even know that the thing that inspired me is meant to think deeply about.
Sure, understood. Yeah.
The moment where I think she's bandaging Kyle up. And she just says, "Tell me about my son." And I had this really profound kind of moment. And what I wrote as my little translation of that is how our future generations are affected by our present.
Yes.
And this weird sort of thing that can only come in genre media like this, where if you imagine speaking to someone who would know your adult kid and be able to ask the question, "Hey, tell me about that person. What are they like?"
Right.
And what is that? Because what's behind that question is effectively, did I do a good job? Right.
Yes.
Did I, what are they like? How have the choices I've made right now that I think are meant to be for their good, do those things pay off? And again, I don't have a ton beyond that. It just really struck me as this really lovely little morsel in the middle of this mechanical movie. And just there's a really great Sarah Grove song whose title is not coming to me, but it's about generations and how the one of the choruses, I didn't look it up, so I don't have all the lyrics in front of me, but the chorus is, "To my great 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 granddaughter, live in peace. To my great 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 grandson, live in peace." And it's just this really beautiful idea that, again, for a very blip on the radar in terms of this movie, conjured for me of like, oh, okay, I should wake up and be about propagating good in my family's life, because that good propagated now may not lead them to be the figurehead of a revolutionary army against a robotic oppressor, but will have echoes, and that's a really powerful thought.
Well, and so granted, you were led there by what is one of the more soft and intimate scenes in the film, but the fundamental to affirm what you're moving towards, the fundamental premise of the film is victory or defeat lies in what happened 40 years ago, which, if we're looking right now, it is the choices we're making right now that may determine destinies decades from now. And that's not meant to be a pressure-filled, oh my God, kind of thing. It's meant to, I don't know what it's meant to do. I'll tell you, I can speak to what it does in me, is presents this idea of the way I father my son right now matters. Right. The way I am a husband to my wife, the way that I am a friend to my friends, the way that I am in my job, I am a boss to employees. The way I lead those people matters. It makes a difference. Like these are the things that, again, fundamental to the premise of the Terminator is we, shore up our victory in the future by going back and destroying their hope in the past. And it's a very galvanizing kind of concept. And again, future installments in the Terminator franchise get buried under the weight of, like, they keep trying to justify that this thing exists and make it logical, instead of just saying, like, this is how it is. This is just what happens. And kind of try to justify their own existence. But fundamentally, in the premise is he says it early on, and I didn't write this down. There's a version of this where Kyle Reese says to her what John Connor in the future made him memorize. And he's like, the future is not set. Like you have, and that's a very powerful idea. You have the ability to affect the future. So you reference that Sarah Grove song. It's like, seeds I'm planting right now are going to affect my son's grandchildren, and seeds that I carry in fruition in my life were planted by my grandfather and my great grandfather.
Sure.
And this notion of being, and it works in both ways. It works in both positive and negative ways, that this notion of being tied to history and being tied to not just the past, products of the past, but seeds of the future. And that the notion of that, yeah, and there's a lot of dialogue right now, not a lot of it by my standard or by my assessment, not a lot of it is very constructive, but there's a lot of conversation right now about this tension about history and how we remember, if I can put it that way. The conversation is frequently not that elevated, but the way we remember what has taken place, and we care. It seems by my understanding, we too infrequently care about the fact of like, no, we are right now paving the way for what will come later, and we are so prone to be obsessive about our momentary comfort, our momentary condition, our momentary liberty, our momentary security, fashion, whatever word you want to in there. We're so prone to be stuck in time that we have no understanding of the ramifications forward or backward. And I do find compelling at its root the fundamental premise of the Terminator that, like, yeah, the only way the machines could obtain victory is to go back like 50 years ago and destroy the hope that there's not even like, and of course they try it again in Terminator 2 to just kill John Connor directly, but they're destroying like the birth of the hope. Right. Like that's what they're destroying. They're destroying the source of it, not even just it in and of itself. This first film attempts that they're going back and going to destroy the mother of hope, the mother of the, like they're going all the way back. And it is, again, the film itself, I think, would be fair to say that the film is not terribly interested in unpacking the ramifications of things like that beyond, the hopefully solid undercurrent of its action story. It's not interested in asking deep philosophical questions. At least it does not seem to be. But again, fundamental to its premise, and I think of utmost consideration for us, valuable consideration for us, is to recognize the product of the history that we come from and the prospect of the future that we are building right now in all of our little choices, in all of our subtle and distinct ways. And I had written down, it's not very dissimilar from what you said. I had written down, when Kyle Reese says to her, it's the trailer line, like it's very much constructed as a script line to be the tag on the premise. Kyle Reese says to her, listen and understand, the Terminator is out there. It can't be bargained with. It can't be reasoned with. It doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear, and it absolutely will not stop ever until you are dead. And to me, it's like the way that the machines, and granted they are machines, but the way that they seek to destroy futures for their own victories, and the way that they seek to basically squash the hope of any prospect of human beings having a thriving existence. It again sparks. I don't want to spend too much time here, but it just sparks the concept of the ways that we, for the sake of brevity and in the interests of candor, it bothers me to a large degree the way so much of our dialogue in political or social conversation has become about defeating the other side, and the way that it has become about we have to win, and that it becomes this thing of like we have to achieve victory. And granted, there could be some valid considerations of winning the fight over wrongdoing and wickedness and evil. All of those things might be completely valid and present and important to the conversation. But it just bothers me the way that we have pitted ourselves against our neighbors in such a degree that we want them squashed. We may not want them squashed like by a hydraulic press like the Terminator at the end of the film, but we might. But we want their ambitions, their goals, their desires. We want them squashed.
Well, I'm gonna really jump in there.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Drive home the metaphor hard of the machines versus humanity. So super random, but applicable to the moment. A neighbor of ours has, and it's actually a different neighbor than you might be thinking of, has political views. We live in a more rural part of our area, and we are a bit more of a progressive home. And so occasionally find ourselves thinking, I don't know if we fit in where we live. But one of our neighbors, I had some one-on-one time the other night. It was socially distanced on their back porch. And this particular neighbor holds some views that I only know because of some of the paraphernalia, like t-shirts and whatnot. And no, it's actually not Trump directly related, but that I don't really like. And that's a bit more extreme nationalism type of ideas. Anyway, so I'm visiting with this person really for one of the first times for probably about an hour. And I came home and my wife kind of expressed a little bit of pride in me for that. And I just had this real sober moment. And I said, well, if God comes to me disguised as my life, this person was standing in front of me and I can't really hold against them the dumb t-shirt they're wearing that literally they were wearing while I was present with them. And I just sort of need to view them as a human that's in front of me that I can be present with and try to build some relationship with and you know, all that sort of stuff. And where I'm going with this of the machines versus humanity thing, what's been challenging as a trend and is made more profound by our COVID moment is the fact that it is only in physical contact of a more traditional variety, sharing space, breaking bread, that bridges can be built, that worldviews can be disassembled in favor of company and companionship. And what's unfortunate, it will come as no surprise, I am a full believer that the coronavirus is a real thing. It's rampaging the world, especially and here in the States. So I don't think there's some nefarious conspiracy afoot. But what has happened is we are even more retreated to our machines than we've ever been.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And what that means in a very practical sense is I can more readily and with more fervency shore up my battlement as I defend myself and my views against the disembodied voices that I'm engaging with in a social media sphere. Does this make sense what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Whereas that person, and hear me, actually, I literally am not referring to myself in this scenario, but just using as that example, I've been pretty good when it comes to social media for about a year now, but not in terms of usage, in terms of engagement, but what is the better, more human, more faithful, more Christ honoring in my brother and sister approach is, okay, we do think differently, but if I can have a human conversation with you, which is hard, it is hard. Like
it's difficult.
That's hard to do in a normal world. Like I had in this scenario, we are literal physical neighbors. So there's a built-in, engagement point. Like I might not have sought this person out otherwise, but when I'm attached, tethered, bound to my machine as a primary point of engagement with the world, it permits me to never either A, embrace the humanity in someone else, or B, be forced to a vulnerable state of sharing my humanity. And so instead, all we engage with is quote unquote ideas and quote unquote dogma and, silly, embittered viewpoints that do matter. I deeply believe that they matter a lot, but should never supersede the care and tenderness we are required, called, and commanded to show to our neighbor.
Yeah, right.
That's all I got.
It is the relationships in my life that have most profoundly honed and molded the nuance to my viewpoints.
Sure.
It is the relationships in my life.
Right.
I read books, I digest them. They are thought-provoking, and many times I will say this: if there is a book I have read that has challenged and impacted me in such a way that it shifted my thinking, chances are extremely strong that there were already a multitude of seeds planted there by relationships I had already had.
Sure.
And it watered that ground. And I'm a voracious reader. I love reading, but it is the relationships in my life that have shifted my thinking, because as I have cultivated what you talk about, the sharing of humanity, the vulnerability of humanity, seeing the humanity in somebody else, and books as a device are, far more enriching and edifying than what you were describing about, like the ways we've retreated to our machines. Sure. Significantly more so. So I'm not taking the opportunity to beat up on books, but yeah, when we absorb all of our data from the increasingly, Bradbury's been on my mind a lot lately. Something Wicked This Way Comes is coming up. In Fahrenheit 451, a key component is the government has summarized thousands of words of text into 2 sentences, including the Bible and massive works of philosophy into like 2 sentences. And the summary. Well, I don't remember what the. Oh. I don't remember what it, No. What I mean is that, because the point is not what the 2 sentences are. It's that they have taken massive amounts of information and summarized them into a sentence or 2 sentences. And that is the data in which, okay, this is the most relevant data that you have. Yes. And a fundamental component of Fahrenheit 451 is, the spoiler alert for that book, but towards the end of it, there are a community of people who have committed text to memory, committed books to memory, and their task, their mission is to recall these words and recite them to each other, and that they may remember.
That's awesome.
And it's lovely. It's powerful and it's beautiful. The final words of Fahrenheit 451 is our character Montag is trying to remember what he will contribute and trying to recall what he will say. And at first he thinks a time to be born and a time to die, a time to tear down and a time to build up. Yes, I could do that. But what he recalls, and this is in Bradbury's book, what he recalls is the passage from Revelation where he says, I saw a tree and a river, and on either side the tree of life, and the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. And that's what Montag chooses to remember. And he says, that's what I'll remember when we reach the city. And it is this profoundly beautiful idea of these, again, the rich history. A tree takes time to grow, and we ourselves plant seeds. I looked up that song that you referenced because I love that Sarah Groves song. It says, remind me of this with every decision, that generations will reap what I sow, and I can pass on a curse or a blessing to those I will never know.
Yes. Trees
take time. That shelter, that shade takes time to cultivate. It takes time to grow. We plant those seeds now. We make those choices now. The choice you make to be kind to the person who cuts you off is not insignificant. The choice you make to be kind and to bear the burden of reconciliation, to include and forgive, all of those kind of things. I'm not trying to ramp myself up, but all of those choices, those little choices. I was having this, and I'll be done. I was talking to somebody earlier today who was we were having a conversation about fretting about the future. And it was all rooted in this politics and sociology and all of this other sort of stuff. And they were fretting about the future. And I said to them, completely unrelated to my thoughts about this conversation, it's just coming back. I said to them, I said, in my view, in my experience, the decisions we think are going to be the really big ones, most of the time probably aren't. It's
Right.
it's the small decisions that you choose to make. The choice to be kind, the choice to be generous, the choice to be giving, the choice to be caring, the choice to be forgiving. It's those small decisions for which you will receive no placard, for which you will receive no money, for which you will receive no reward or laudit. Those are the decisions on which history hinges, because that is the decision towards relationship. That's the decision towards community. That's the decision towards furthering growth and goodness in the world around you. Those are the choices, those little choices that you make. So it is not insignificant when you choose to pass over, because who knows? I mean, and who knew? Again, it's a silly sci-fi action thriller premise, but the future hinges on these two people who happened to make an intimate connection in this, wild world that then 50 years from then will change the course of the future. And we would do well to remember and to remind ourselves that generations will reap what we sow.
Except, does the future movies? I did recall I've seen Salvation.
Oh, right.
That's the Christian Bale one. Does the future mythology address the time loop aspect? I mean, Terminator
It
1,
tries.
the first Terminator, I was like, oh, well, they're all screwed, because now you've just locked yourself into a bootstrap paradox of
they try.
calories,
Yeah, they try and they fail, which is why I had referenced earlier that I enjoy the simplicity of this one, because future ones, really past two does a pretty good job of like shoring things up, but past two, once you get into Rise of the Machines and beyond, it begins to buckle under the weight of all of the different time travel loops and things, and they try to play fun with it, and some of it is genuinely kind of fun, but that's kind of where it ends. It's not.
Is the show any good? Sarah Connor Chronicles?
I only watched like a couple of episodes. It didn't arrest me. But no, I mean, and obviously huge kudos to the culturally significant Terminator franchise. And like I said, the first Terminator is a well, we can get into Fog Meter in a second, but
Sure.
the second Terminator is, a masterclass in action filmmaking, arguably one of the greatest action films ever made. So it's definitely got its praiseworthiness. But yeah, why don't we? I've really enjoyed this conversation. Are you ready to pivot into the Fog Meter? The Fog Meter is our very specific metric of fear and God, where we rate our films or the material that we cover on their scares and their substance. So here we are talking about James Cameron's original installment in the landmark franchise, The Terminator. So on the fear measurement, I think there's some pretty creepy stuff going on in this. It's not a terribly scary movie, but just tonally, it's got some good creepy vibes, and some of the stuff with Arnold being the robot, and obviously the eyeball surgery, and some of the stuff towards the end is enough to make me want to give it a 6 out of 10 on the fear factor. What say you?
I think, and there are there's nothing else that comes to mind as quite direct comparison here, but I think there's just so much weight bearing down on this that in terms of pop culturally, that just knowing the general sort of energy about it makes it a lot less scary. I think what I'm trying to say is there's a world where I could envision in 1984, if you went to the movie theater and saw this, you'd be like freaking out and just like totally engaged and totally, caught up in it. But watching it perhaps for the second time the other night, I was like, oh, it's fine. So I'm gonna go. If Anna and the Apocalypse last week was a 5 on scares, this is probably pretty comparable. So about a 5.
Okay. And on the God meter, what say you?
I think what I brought to it was a little more than necessarily what it was trying to ponder specifically. I'll before I get to that, I'll give it a I'll go to 5 as well on the God meter.
Okay. I think for me, I think what substance there is baked into the fundamental premise, not necessarily explored in great detail by the film itself. I'm actually going to land myself at a 6 again, because I feel like it's there in terms of, like I said, the premise has it sort of baked into the concept, but not. I think it's actually more richly explored in Terminator 2 than it is in this first one. But yeah, so that means that we give the Terminator, directed by James Cameron, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger and Linda Hamilton and Michael Biehn, a 5.5 on the fog meter, which interestingly enough is exactly what we gave Anna the Apocalypse. But so that's a 5.5 on the fog meter. The bigger question, of course, as always, is would you recommend the Terminator to people?
I think as a kind of foundation stone in the genre, be that sci-fi or horror, I think it's pretty a bit of a necessary watch. I think until the third act, it doesn't feel like there's a ton of energy to it. Like,
understood.
For me, it wasn't super propulsive. I think the makeup effects are great. I think the creature design and execution of the visuals are fantastic. I think there's a world in which I would believe Cameron learned how to fashion some new visual effects and crafted a story around that, which is okay. But because of that, it kind of is a little weak in sort of the thematic threads. So that's a long-winded way of saying I recommend it more as a canonical entry point than as a you're going to love this movie if you haven't seen it kind of thing.
That's actually a really astute assessment, and I think I would sit in the same place. Like, as a sci-fi horror fan, you have to see it at least once because it's too seminal for too many other things. But that having been said, I think, understandably so, Terminator 2 is actually the one that I would be more championing of and excited.
I'm literally interested in watching that now.
Yeah, right.
But it's 1 a.m. and I can't do that.
But you should check it out sometime soon, because I'm telling you, now having in proximity seen the first Terminator, I think you would really strongly appreciate where they extend things to in Terminator 2, because Terminator 2 is just it's incredible filmmaking. So yeah, it's like I would more strongly say you got to watch. Yeah, Terminator 2 is the one to get to, but in order to get there, and again, for how much groundwork it lays and for how impactful and culturally significant it is, it's almost a necessary watch, even if your experience of it is just to check a box. Although I think there's a strong possibility you will actively enjoy it for what it is. So yeah, that puts episode 2 of #InTheMorning, this third season. Phase 3, this third season of The Leftovers, this third phase of our series in the books. Next week, a film that I am incredibly excited to revisit. It is a film I have only seen once, have very fond memories of and strong memories of, but I'm very curious to see it for a second time.
Yeah, I forgot we were covering it. And,
yeah.
And now I'm energized to rewatch it because I did enjoy the first viewing, but that's all I've seen. I know I have seen it once.
And this is just a second viewing for me as well, but it's Mel Gibson's film Apocalypto, which loosely is about the Mayan civilization towards the end of its days. It was long unavailable digitally, and only this year was released to Amazon Prime and available to rent or stream on various other outlets. I don't know what the difference was that finally made it available, but for a long time it was only available on a very expensive DVD that was out of print, and only this year has become available digitally, which, not lying, is largely the reason why it pushed into this series, because I was like, this is great. This is a great opportunity for us to talk about this film. So yes, Mel Gibson's film Apocalypto is next week's coverage, and sees episodes 5 and 6 of season 3 of The Leftovers. So check that out next week. Nathan, as always, thank you very, very much for staying up very late and having this conversation with me. And listeners, as we say on every episode, the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, but not the end of the conversation. And in that spirit, we encourage you to fear nothing else and to be on your way rejoicing.
See you guys.
Bye, everybody.